Good afternoon. My name is Danette Roth, and I'm here to discuss with you the purpose, the interpretation, and results of assessments that were performed on Calvin, and then we'll conclude and discuss how those results link to his diagnosis and eligibility for special education services. Now, as we had discussed previously, when we got your permission to perform these assessments, we had discussed performing the Assessment of Functional Living Skills, or the AFLS, on occupational therapy, functional skills observation, and assistive technology curriculum assessment summary, the Goldman-Fristow test of articulation, the Wechsler nonverbal scale of ability, the Vinland 3, and the comprehensive assessment of spoken language. If we go back to the Assessment of Functional Living Skills test, we did that assessment to determine Calvin's strengths in meals at school, his classroom mechanics, classroom routines, his expectations in the classroom, social skills, and technology. We also addressed common knowledge, areas of academics in both applied academics and core academics. In the occupational therapy functional skills observation, determined Calvin's fine motor skills, his coordination, if he's able to help himself in the classroom, if he's able to be independent with adaptive and functional living skills. We performed an assistive technology curriculum assessment to determine if assistive technology will help Calvin in the classroom. We're trying to make him more independent in his expression. We performed the Goldman-Fristow test of articulation, and that was to examine his ability to produce different speech sounds. We did the Wechsler nonverbal scale of ability, and that was a general cognition test to determine his abilities in the classroom. We performed the Vinland 3 to measure his adaptive behavior, things that Calvin might do in his everyday life. And then finally we performed the comprehensive assessment of spoken language, and that was to measure his receptive and expressive language skills. The results of those tests indicate that the assessment of functional living skills, we looked at his meals at school, classroom mechanics, routines and expectations, social skills, technology, common knowledge, core academics, and applied academics. In the area of meals at school, Calvin is able to get his own breakfast and lunch. He's able to input his student number independently. He's able to give the cashier money if necessary. He's able to independently open his milk container and fruit cups. He needs cues regarding portion control and making sure he has a well-balanced meal. In the area of classroom mechanics, Calvin knows the location of all supplies in the classroom. He is able to retrieve them and replace them as necessary. In the area of routine and expectations, Calvin knows his morning routine. He can follow multiple verbal directions. He knows the expectations inside and outside of the classroom. He is able to navigate the school independently. He does need support and reminders when raising his hand during classroom instruction time. A lot of time he wants to shout out an answer, so we're working on raising our hand, giving him directions. He needs support when restating those directions to determine if he understands what's being asked of him. He needs prompting when using a calendar. He can follow a daily schedule. He knows the days of the week. He knows what today is, tomorrow, yesterday, but he needs help in those more abstract areas of the calendar. In the area of social skills, he loves to participate in class. He initiates conversations with his peers and adults, but he does need reminders to excuse himself. There'll be times where adults are talking and he'll just come up and start speaking instead of saying, "Excuse me," or if he's trying to pass too close to someone, he will just try to pass instead of saying, "Excuse me." And he has difficulty identifying the perspective of others. In regard to technology, He is able to operate his tablet. He has basic computer knowledge. He's able to monitor the battery life of his tablet, but he does need assistance in regard to printing a document, typing, learning where the letters are at on the keyboard. When we say his student ID, he gets confused, and sometimes he might. If we say his lunch number, then he's okay, and he knows to use that as his username, but to know that his student number and his lunch number are the same thing is difficult for him, as well as the password. He is unable to save documents. He does not know how to use search engines. In the area of common knowledge, Calvin is able to identify and locate classroom objects. He knows the names of his parents, teachers, and peers. He knows his colors, days of the week, months, the current date, the current weather. He can identify the city in which he lives on the map, but he does need assistance with personal information. He does not know his address, the state he lives, or the country in which he lives. In regard to core academics, Calvin is able to identify the letters of the alphabet. He is able to copy letters and sentences. He's able to rote count and regroup, subtract. He's able to identify dollar bills, count coins, tell time, but he does need assistance with his reading strategies and writing sentences. In the areas of applied academics, Calvin is able to complete tasks in a specified amount of time. He is able to correct his errors and read a table to answer questions, but he needs assistance addressing envelopes, comprehending text, writing his signature, measuring, reading the temperature in a thermostat, and understanding an index and table of contents when reading a book. In regard to the occupational therapy functional skills observation, Calvin demonstrates adequate fine motor, bilateral coordination skills, and hand strength to complete multiple school-related tasks within his functional skills classroom. He's able to copy all his letters, upper and lowercase, with legibility. He only needs occasional verbal prompts to correct errors. He has the fine motor coordination and dexterity to nest and translate up to 5 small items within his palm without dropping them. He has bilateral coordination to cut with scissors, sew buttons, manipulate a screwdriver, screw or unscrew a battery compartment, open packages, utilize a can opener to open cans, peel and cut vegetables. He's able to independently open his locker using a 3-digit combination. He's able to tie his shoes, complete fasteners, manage his clothing, and navigate throughout the cafeteria obtaining meal items. In regard to his assistive technology curriculum assessment, the evaluation was conducted to assess Calvin's ability to utilize word prediction software. He did struggle with that. He could not recognize the words that were presented to him on the monitor. We changed to a speech-generating communication device for various functions of language. The results of those trials indicated that Calvin struggled to use the word prediction software again. However, he was able to use the speech-generating device to supplement his verbal communication skills and type out his thoughts and ideas. He remembers when to space after typing a word. He remembers punctuation when typing his sentences. In regard to the Goldman-Fristow test of articulation, he was asked to look at a series of colorful pictures. Each was designed to elicit different consonant sounds. Many of the sounds were elicited 2 to 3 times, and Calvin had a total of 28 errors on sounds specifically elicited through each picture. His raw scores converted to a standard score of 40, and he often substituted the w sound for the l, and y sound, or the rl and y. He would substitute the w sound for the rl and y in his initial positions of the words, and for the o or ah, he would substitute the ah for the and the ol. So he would substitute a soft o sound for the r and the l at the end of words. Calvin also demonstrates f and th errors and the sh, ch, and j sounds. And those errors were consistent with the errors in his conversational speech. The sounds and sentence test was administered to assess Calvin's sound production of words in connected speech And the sounds and sentence test included 2 stories used for the sentence repetition task. Story 1 provides standard scores for individuals, and then story 2 provided a standard scores. The story was read once by the evaluator, and then the student was expected to retell the story by imitating 1 sentence at a time. But the sentences were too long for Corbin to repeat word for word, so the examiner had to shorten each sentence so Calvin would be able to repeat it with all the target words. He demonstrated the same errors at the sentence level that he demonstrated at the word level. He could often say the target word accurately, but unintelligibly. It was still poor due to articulation errors that he makes on other words in the sentences. The intelligibility rating is used to evaluate an individual's intelligibility in connected speech. During administration of the sounds and sentences test, the examiner listens to each sentence the student repeats and rates the student's intelligibility for the sentence as good, fair, poor, or no response. And Calvin's overall intelligibility rating suggests that only 10% of his utterances achieved a good rating. Calvin's intelligibility rating was significantly impacted by distortions and substitution errors. Next, we administered the Wechsler nonverbal scale of ability. Calvin was required to examine different shapes and other geometric forms and determine how they were interrelated through spatial or logical organizations and select an option to complete the pattern. Calvin was also required to view a picture for 3 seconds and then select the option on the following page, which was identical to the picture he saw relative to his same age peers. Calvin obtained a full-scale standard score of 48 and is currently functioning very low. The Vinland 3 assessment was performed to determine current levels of adaptive functioning at home and at school. Calvin was assessed by his mother, Savannah, and his teacher at school in the areas of communication and daily living skills and socialization. According to his mother, Calvin scored a 67 in the area of communication, which is considered low. He scored 68 in the area of daily living skills, which is considered low. He scored 75 on his adaptive behavior, which is moderately low. And then his composite score was 69, which is low. His teacher also assessed him, and she scored him at a 70 in the area of communication, which is low. She scored him 66 in the area of daily living skills, which is considered low. He scored a 61 in the area of socialization, which is considered low, and he scored a 65 in the area of adaptive behavior, which is considered low. Finally, we performed the comprehensive assessment of spoken language, and that assessment looks at 4 language structures: the lexile, semantic, cynical, supralinguistic, and pragmatics. It determines deficits in language and processing skills in the areas of comprehension, expression, and retrieval. Scores were attained in the following areas: antonyms, he scored a 53, synonyms a 49, sentence completion 44, syntax construction 40, paragraph comprehension 40, grammatical judgment 55, non-literal language 56, grammatical morphemes 48, sentence comprehension 67, pragmatic judgment 40, his core composite was 45, lexile semantics 46, and syntax 46. He had a difficult time understanding the directions and tasks to complete the test, and his receptive and expressive language scores were equivalent, which indicates his expression and receptive language skills are functioning at the same level. Calvin's skills on all subtests fell in the low range when compared to his typically developing peers. So, based off of the assessments that we performed on Calvin, he still qualifies for special education under intellectual disability, and due to his significant speech and language impairment, he still qualifies for speech and language services. However, in regard to his occupational therapy functional skills observation, he performed rather high. So in that area, we would consult instead of having him receive services for occupational therapy. Do you have any questions? Thank you.